was such an energetic introduction. Thanks, Caroline. Well, when we first started meeting, I think our first 5 minutes of just me talking, after that, we first organized around this idea around access and lack thereof in our broad economic landscape. So our title is kind of self-reflective of that, and this North Star idea of ours really emerged out of how do we enhance access in a local sense to induce a regional economic platform that's broad and allows everybody to thrive and continues to invest in future generations. So looking at the numbers of California versus US, I mean, there's some things that really stand out here in terms of our economic performance and where we're lacking and on our current state of affairs. But one of the things that's not up there is that maybe 20, 30 years ago, median income in LA was $22,000, and that seems really low, but when adjusted for inflation, what we get to is that accounts for about $64,000 in 2018 dollars, and any family with median income of $64,000 is struggling. And I think it's no wonder that we see so many people struggling to make bill payments, forced into stark imbalances, economic choices between rent and food, and things of that sort. So what we wanted to take a look at is how did we get here, and what are some of the root causes of this situation? If you look at, I just pulled this article down yesterday at how we're currently investing from an educational system standpoint, even though we have rising entry rates into our CSUs and our UC system, public funding for that is way down, while also exacerbating this challenge is the student debt associated. So how are we coupling student debt onto these folks who are getting out of college? And we see that, and we know, even some of our own research at the Milken Institute, what an increase in education will do in terms of your future economic prospects. So it makes sense to invest in the youth and in human capital. But some of what's occurring now in terms of housing and how we're allowing access, you can see that this really stark imbalance in terms of our rising housing costs, and it's really centered around not just prices and how we can access price, but how we're building and our building and how we're holding our local communities accountable for our local housing stock is really kind of abysmal. So what we're looking at is people who are really forced into these stark economic conditions, really located here in Los Angeles, are being forced out of the state altogether. But when we look at what's really achievable from a local standpoint and what we can do on a local side to induce a more inclusive economy, we look at how the state and local jurisdictions currently take in money, and it's largely associated on property and personal income tax. So what's a local jurisdiction to do there? Well, what we think and what we're really tied to is this notion that as we structure out how we invest in human capital along a number of different aspects and how we can engage a community standpoint, we have to start with measuring what we own from a local asset class and how we can use those assets to increase revenues and pour that back into housing developments, educational pathways that increase access, that allow people to thrive, that allow folks to get a real kind of equal playing field. And I wanted to read a few stark stats here that kind of set us up for the rest of our presentation. So we stopped building housing in traditional workforce and affordable classes. For the past 10 years, the state has averaged less than 80,000 new homes annually. But from 1955 to 1989, the state averaged more than 200,000 homes annually, and that's from the new CHD report. We have real diminished spending on public education that we saw in a previous slide. And since 1980, tuition costs of the UC system has risen 800%. And lastly, and one of the big points that we wanted to raise in this conversation is how we've limited access to open space in urban communities and how we've really limited funding on a recreational space in underserved communities. Access to urban space all throughout LA County is very stark, and as my friend Marion likes to point out, 50% of middle school kids in LA County have never been to the beach. So we think you can do more to change this, and we think it starts at the local city level with measuring our assets. And to that point, we set up the city of Huntington Park as an example to see how we could do this, and how we could go about this in terms of measuring assets. We're going to talk about Huntington Park in the context of how we induce a local, a regional economic landscape.
So when we think about disadvantaged communities, I don't like to think of the Southeast Los Angeles as a disadvantaged community, but the reality is the reality. So throughout the presentation, you'll hear references to the Southeast Los Angeles, specifically looking at the city of Huntington Park, which pretty much the demographics are pretty much the same around neighboring cities. So the city of Huntington Park, you see two pictures. One in the top is from 1903, which is more of a farm community, to what it was in the late 90s and what it is now, a thriving city with a lot of people. And the city of Huntington Park, just so that you know, was incorporated in 1906, so it's a very old city, over 100 years old. And side note, in many ways the city started its pathways to incorporation through the way of transportation. Henry Huntington ran his red line through actually this side of it. This is Randolph, and believe it or not, into 2028, we might actually have another red line running through Huntington Park. This line, the Pacific Electric Red Line, ran for many years, and it ran from Huntington Park all the way to to Whittier, I'm sorry. And up to the mid-70s, the city was majority Caucasian. To the mid-70s to now, it has changed dramatically to what we see today. So today, the population of Huntington Park as of 2010, over 59,000 people. Today, we put it more at 70,000, 80,000. 3 square miles, 97% Latino. Median income is a little bit over 35,000. So you have a working class community. The median age is 30. But more strikingly, and this Huntington Park is not alone at this, the under 18 population is 29.45%. So that means that education is very, very important. When we look at neighboring cities that border Huntington Park, Maywood, Bell, Warner Park, you see the same, except maybe similar percentages of over 29.45%. So if you do the aggregate, it's a little bit over 29%. So it's startling that a lot of, when it comes to equity and access to education, the conversations need to start very early. The importance of early childhood education, we've heard it many, many times. In 2014, LAUSD passed a student index, which provided a focused local funding control that would provide more resources to those schools that needed the most. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out the way it did. And in 2016, you had the Equity Alliance that composed of the Advancement Project, Community Coalition, and Inner City Struggle that provided LAUSD with a different student equity index that would be more focused on schools that needed, that had over 60% of students that needed this type of funding. Because a lot of the schools that are in Huntington Park were not getting the funding that they needed, including other schools within the region. So actually, this is pretty new. This past April, the LAUSD passed the Student Index Equity, which is a Student Index 2.0, as they call it. And it remains to be seen how this is going to work. We have to track it. We have to see how and monitor it to see how it will actually help the schools that need it the most, specifically when it comes to middle and elementary. When it comes to the regional effort on education access, looking beyond the early years of childhood education, we look at enhanced infrastructural financing districts, which is something new, relatively new, that the state has passed. A lot of people call it redevelopment 2.0. So for those that don't know what it is, it provides a broad authority for local agencies to use tax increment to finance a wide variety of projects. So in many ways, it provides flexibility as to what we can fund with that money. what we were thinking about is looking outside the box and saying, okay, if we have an EIFD that goes beyond the Huntington Park and goes to the Southeast community, we can look at scholarships, paying an additional year of community college for those students that are not thinking of a four-year university but are thinking of going into community college. The state already provides a year now paid for those that want to go to community college, so why not add another year to those students, or provide scholarships for those that want to go to four-year universities, for those students that meet certain requirements. Brownfield remediation is something that can be done through an EIFD. So why not look at building an additional satellite, a college satellite, which one is located in the city of Southgate, which is in the Southeast city, and specifically focus on STEM and the green-blue economy. So that way we have the next workforce, since we are focusing a lot on this renewable energy and STEM, and that way provide a pathway for a lot of students that maybe don't see a way to get a career and beyond just going to a four-year university and providing those different opportunities. Apart from education access, obviously we want to focus on providing a safety net for the students on housing security, and you will hear about that right now.
When we're contemplating the quality of life in our region, we would be remiss to not talk about where we lay our heads, where we raise our families. In our region, we're suffering from a housing crisis. And this photo, which most of us can relate to, is quintessential from decades past of what the American dream is. This is entitled, "The American Dream of Home Ownership." Doesn't look like my neighborhood. This is more typical of our region. Renters can afford a housing experience typically about $1,000 less monthly than home ownership is what home ownership requires. And to afford a typical rent in our region, you need to earn over $8,000 a month. If you're a salesperson, if you're a bus driver, if you're a preschool teacher, you still can't afford the median asking rent in our region. And this is a problem. How much money do households really have to spend? For a median household, it's almost a third of your income. If you're less than that, most of your money is going to rent. If you consider housing costs in our region, LA County would be 26% in poverty. So in thinking about how to empower local jurisdictions and what cities can do in employing financial strategies, if you will, establishing an EIFD will empower small cities to establish new rules of engagement to developers. They can engage in what the priorities are for their communities, and their landscape can reflect that. Using a lens of value capture, we contemplate what are opportunities for cities to benefit from inevitable land increases from investment in infrastructure. Typically, a private developer is the one who benefits from such development. Let's look at Apartment Finder. Today, if you live nearby a transit stop in Chinatown at Blossom Plaza, for a 2-bedroom studio, you're looking at $1,700 up to $5,000, and that's out of my range. So let's look at Huntington Park and think about the opportunities that this city will have. The train is coming. It's a major infrastructure project for the region. Last week, Metro just moved to study their preferred alternative for the West Santa Ana branch. This reflects a project that covers over 98 miles. It affects 20 cities and 1.5 million people. Within this region, there are over 584,000 jobs. And most importantly, consider that population and employment densities are 5 times higher than LA County. So let's talk about what such an infrastructure project's impact could mean for our region. In thinking about a typical development project along this rail line, for example, city zoning codes establish maximum building envelopes, floor areas. If you look at the lower red line, that's what could be allowable today. If you establish an EIF, come to our city, but we're gonna ask you to build up 2 more floors, and you can bet that those are going to be affordable housing units. An EIFD will allow a city to buy and develop land, to charge for airspace, and control their floor area. And this is what a local jurisdiction can include in a nearby transit stop to create an inclusive environment which reflects the community's priorities for not just affordable housing, but a sense of community and commercial and shopping opportunities that don't exist there today. Just quickly, a couple tools that can also be employed for small jurisdictions, following the model of the city of San Francisco. I'm gonna say a bad word, my mom's not here. Inclusionary zoning can be employed. It's part of their code. It requires that a developer either set aside, build, or pay in lieu fees. Additionally, in Los Angeles, we recently adopted a linkage fee. No nexus is required, the court has established, so the city can charge a fee to do business in their city, which can establish a fund to provide affordable housing. And finally, another strategy is a land trust fund, which is an independent nonprofit organization who's charged with establishing permanent affordable housing in the city. An example that we identified was in the city of Irvine, the Irvine Land Trust, who's been successful as the property owner to develop housing which can be transferred, as well as rental properties for lower income residents. So we can't talk about just work for our region. Let's contemplate the quality of life play opportunities.
I have a couple questions for the room. I'd like to know who here knows how to swim. Show of hands. You learned how to swim. That's so good. Now I want to know how you use your swimming. How many people here have been to the beach right here? How many people are yearly visitors to the beach? Monthly? Weekly? Daily? Yeah, no? Oh, yes, yes. All right. So our group consensus was that we wanted a community, like communities all over the region of Los Angeles, to have the freedom of choice. The freedom of choice to use LA for its uniqueness, and that would be the coastline. And this is a picture of Surf Bus in action. The children in this photo are 5 years old. We want to establish public-private partnerships in Huntington Park. There's one nonprofit operating in Huntington Park, and it's for housing. There's none for recreation. But what we do have near Huntington Park are a bunch of public pools. And what we'd like to do is get swim lessons. We want to take advantage of the Make a Splash Foundation. It's from the USA Swimming Federation, and they have a goal to teach 1 million people, 1 million children, how to swim. And with 30% of the population being under 17, Huntington Park is the perfect test population for this goal. We believe that if we can teach kids to swim, that we're going to give them a life skill that's going to go far beyond the classroom. Now, it's not just the skill of swimming, though, that is going to help kids and families feel this freedom of choice. In this picture, I see one thing, and it's fear. And fear is a big one. Just because you know how to swim doesn't mean that you feel comfortable using your skills or leaving your community to explore the coast. Support is necessary. Family involvement's necessary. And then there's more to it than this. This is a roadmap from Huntington Park to the coast. This photo represents a 45-minute to a 2-hour drive to the beach. That's time prohibitive, even if you have a car. So we want to use, once we've got kids learning how to swim through their schools, through local YMCAs, we want to get them involved in the surf bus. We take populations of scale from established groups out to the beach, and we take these swim skills and we bring them to life, and we use the ocean to measure self-esteem, motivation, endurance, and trust. We take things that are learned in the classroom and we bring them to life, because you can't stop the waves, but you can teach people how to surf. And we can take what you do and buttress your education in a classroom with real-life field trips. But what if you didn't have to drive an hour to 2 hours to the beach? What if we could bring the waves right to Huntington Park? This is not the LA River, but it could be. This is Kelly Slater's wave pool in Lemoore. It's about the length of the LA River, and the Olympics are coming, and surfing is going to be in the Olympics.
So far, the conversation we've had has been about choices, right? Choices in education, housing, recreation, right? If we had all the amenities in our communities, we probably wouldn't want to leave, right? For a community like Huntington Park, sometimes they don't have those choices, right? So I'm going to talk to you about that, but first I want to present you with what I think is a pretty beautiful choice, right? This is actual conceptual designs from LA County Public Works of an in-channel improvement of the LA River. There's people in there, there's vendors, there's people walking in there. You're not allowed to do that right now, yet you will see people in there driving their cars and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But we want to think about how do we reimagine open spaces in the absence of actual funding, land, what have you, right? So when we look at Huntington Park, we should look at, it's a very dense city, high population, only 4 parks. These are the actual county averages in terms of how much park space is available for this community. It's not a lot. It's not a lot, and unfortunately, this is a common issue amongst a lot of underserved communities where they don't have enough park space to serve the residents. And I kind of want to present the LA River as an option for recreational space. This is the general map of what the LA River looks like. It connects 33 cities from the Elysian Valley all the way to Long Beach, and it channels all the way to the ocean. For those of you that don't know the history of the LA River, it started getting built in 1938. It took about 30 to 40 years to complete. It's a channel. It's basically a channel that takes all the water to the ocean. Before the LA River was there was mass flooding in Southern California. So imagine all of this area, downtown LA, be flooded. We complain about our driving right now. Imagine how you'd be complaining if it was totally flooded. So I want to present to you what would be an opportunity in terms of recreation for an LA River that's 51 miles through Southern California. You may ask yourself, why the LA River, right? Why don't we use traditional approaches of coming up with grant funding, finding a big philanthropy or a big organization that helps build park? Again, Huntington Park, like many other communities, does not have the same recreational space that other communities may have. So I'll let you see for yourself some of these statistics in terms of how dense some of these cities along the LA River are. Specifically, you should probably look at the top 8 of the 8 cities are among the 100 densest cities in the U.S. More than 1 million people live within a mile of the LA River. So chances are all of us can probably get to the LA River within a 15, 20-minute drive, if that, right? So we should also consider it individually as a recreational space. But given this impact to the region, to our population, to all of us as individually, I think we should consider it as an option. When we talk about the LA River, it's really a tale of 2 rivers, right? The LA River is really, what you see up there on the top left image is a bike signage. There's a very fully developed bike path. You can actually kayak in portions of the LA River, the more affluent portions of the LA River. I don't know if you've ever done it. It's really fun. They started kayaking last week. It was kayaking season, so I'm happy to help you out with that. But for most communities like Huntington Park, the bottom picture is what it looks like. It's cement most of the time, graffiti, homeless, what have you. There's a bike path that's connected, not connected, depending on what you do. People have to get off the street, cross through a major intersection to connect to the bike path to use it. It's just not a safe environment, right? But again, let's reimagine how we reuse this recreational space for a community like Huntington Park. As we reimagine the LA River for Huntington Park, I also want to present to you some options of what's been done throughout the world and locally as well. On the top left-hand corner is a picture of the Cheyenne River, how it looks at normally. You see people walking and doing their thing. On the right is a beach at the river. We've actually looked at doing a beach at the river. Wouldn't that be cool if we had that here locally? I think even if you really didn't want to go to the river, even you would just go check it out, bring your lawn chair, see what it is. That's something that's a great option. Also, the San Antonio Riverwalk, I think we've probably all heard of that. That's an incredible project for a community that kind of changed the whole landscape of San Antonio. For Huntington Park, and again, this is an actual conceptual design. I'm not like, hey, selling a pipe dream. This is what it looks like if you were to connect a community like Huntington Park, an urban community. You see housing, you see people walking, and that to the left, you see someone biking. It's actually using the recreationally the LA River. And you've heard it mentioned before, EIFDs. Oh, we're done? So we mentioned EIFDs. We need to pay for it, and we pay for it through EIFDs, focus on housing, education, and recreation. It should be a case study for us to consider now, and hopefully if it's successful in 10 years, we're able to apply it regionally. Thank you.